Hello and welcome to Bungalows for Bachelors number, oh boy, number six, I think. Yes, number six, site planning and utility access. Today we are going to talk about site planning and utility access, which is something that is it's very much it's related to a lot, finding a lot. What do you look at on a lot? You know, like it's a separate thing from house design usually. Um, it's uh, it's something that there's a lot more information to learn about how you're going to affect your house build with all of the rest of the stuff. And we are going to just jump right in here. So I will share my screen and we will get going. Okay. So we are still in phase one pre-construction. We don't get to build anything yet again. And we are talking about site planning and utility access. So you're gonna ask yourself, what is site planning? Well, site planning is exactly that. It's a site is a place where you're trying to build, and planning is where you are looking at all of the factors that are going to influence your build on that particular lot. So let's look at a site plan, for example, because it's all mostly, it's somewhat about the document, but there's a lot of work that's not on this on like an architectural set anyway that affects your build. But let's look at the document so you can see one. So this is a fairly simple site plan, a fairly small rectangular lot. The kinds of things you're going to see on a basic site plan are going to be the property lines. The property lines are going to determine where you are definitely, not allowed to build outside of because it's not your property. Now, there are also going to be things on here like easements and setbacks. There's no easements on this particular plan, but the setback lines, this is a 30-foot building setback line. So basically what this means is whoever like platted and developed out this subdivision said we want all the houses to be at least 30 feet away from the front property line. And that's done for uniformity. It's done for different reasons. But that's usually what that's about. It would look really odd if people were building stuff right up at the front of their property. So there's usually side setbacks as well. They're usually not more than 5 feet unless it's a really big lot and there's a reason for it. Because having 10 feet between houses is enough for fire safety and things like that. But there's some side setbacks. And in this case, there's oops, I wasn't supposed to move. There's there's no rear setback because there's just some other property back here and there's no reason to have a rear setback, I suppose. So this guy's house is, the foundation footprint is dropped on the site plan and it's sort of dimensioned roughly so that some guys can come in and drop the corners of the building so that it's, not inside the setback. And you can kind of show a rough driveway idea and some goals and stuff like that. So that is what a site plan can look like. This is a pretty basic one. There can be more complex things. There can be trees on here. There can be topography stuff on here, showing grades and slopes and stuff. But this is a pretty basic one. But that's what it would look like in a plan set. So we'll jump back, and I'm still sharing, right? Okay. So the site plan and planning around your site is all about how is your home that you have theoretically designed, how is it going to interact with your site? Now, this matters sometimes. A lot of the time, homes are just designed with a flat foundation architecturally, and the home is designed like irrespective of what lot it's going to go on, unless there's a super small lot and you have to fit it to something. If you got a lot of space, people are just going to design the home they want, and that's going to be that. And then they will just drop it where it's convenient for them. Sometimes lots aren't conducive for that. Like in this left photo over here, these are all kind of flat lots, so they can just kind of slap houses on here, no big deal. This farmland looking one, same idea. You can pretty much design whatever you want and drop it anywhere on your property. And on this castle looking one on the right, you can tell this property is on a steep slope. So in this case, they changed the design of their house to follow the slope and be a multi-level house to kind of account for the fact that there's this huge grade change. Sometimes you will see some silly stuff where people will build the house as if it was on flat ground, but they'll put it on a steep lot. This happens frequently in the Canyon Lake area in Texas, up north in San Antonio, that kind of stuff, and steep rocky areas. And they will literally, on the far end of their house, they'll have like 13 feet, 14 feet. They'll have these crazy exposed concrete faces. That's their foundation, simply because they didn't want to design the house to fit the slope of the lot. It's just like, it's kind of silly, but it's expensive. But the main idea is you should be thinking about the site you are going to be putting a house on or whatever you're building, because it can have an impact. Now, if it's going to be a flattish thing, then you pretty much just don't worry about it. So, what are utilities? Utilities are the things that are the benefits the society has grown and learned how to provide such that it makes our lives better. Potable water being supplied at the street so that you can connect it to your house and you can get nice clean water to come out of your taps inside your house. That is a nice benefit. So the cities and jurisdictions will usually provide something like that. If you don't have access to that, then you end up having to drill for a well to get your clean water and filter it on your own and stuff like that. So that is one utility. Another one would be sewer and septic. This is pretty much, how are you going to get rid of the water that you just brought into your house? You can't just like keep it. It's got to go somewhere. So most of it's considered, black water or gray water. Black water being like, poop and pee and the nasty stuff. And gray water is usually like a less gross, like the water that comes off of dishes when you clean dishes or when you wash your hands and stuff like that. That's gray water. So two different types of wastewater. But the main premise is that it's got to get out of your house and go somewhere where it's not going to cause anybody a problem. This water is usually contaminated, and so you can't just release it back into the environment. When you're on a city system, it's all going to run underground in pipes all the way back using gravity, usually, to a main water treatment facility where they're going to effectively clear up the water, get all the junk out, and potentially reuse the water or release it into a safe place or whatever. So a sewer system is what that is called. That's where the sewer is, the public system of the piping. And a septic system is when you have to release that waste, but you don't have access to a public system. So you basically need to release it in a safe way back into the soils around your property. And there are ways in which basically septic engineers can come in, figure out how much water your soil can absorb, and they basically just spread it all out over a large area, depending on your property. And it's a safe, clean way of getting the wastes to be out of your house, basically. So that's sewer and septic. Power and communications. These are the things that you see on all of the poles that run along the city streets and county roads and stuff like that. Power is pretty clear. That's electricity. Electricity powers pretty much everything we use these days. So this is something that pretty much everybody needs, and it's pretty much something that you don't build unless you are going to pay for a lot of solar and some big batteries and or maybe a crazy generator or something. You're not going to be supplying your own power. It is just too expensive and too complicated to do that. Most places are going to have power accessible. Power is one of the less expensive things to spread out, because it's not that crazy hard to set a pole in the ground and then like run the wires between them. Water and sewer have to be buried in the ground, which is just expensive in general because you have to dig up and then put it in and then bury it, and it's a lot harder to travel long distances. So power is going to be available most places. Sometimes you can find a raw land lot that's going to have power nearby, but it's not going to have water or sewer because those things are much more expensive, more difficult to get to travel farther. So communications is basically Wi-Fi, internet, phone, the companies that work in communications. If you ever look at a power line, a regular one that's running through your streets, all of the power is going to sit at the top of the pole, and it's going to run on those lines, and all the communication lines are going to be about 10, 20 feet hanging below that. So basically the communication companies make deals with the electric companies when the poles were installed, and they say, well, let us hang our stuff off of it too. And then they basically, the communication companies come in and they pay to have their communications spread out on these poles so that when people build, they're going to be available and they can get customers from that. So every now and then you'll see in your neighborhood a new internet people come through, and they're going around hanging a bunch of stuff, the new fiber optic or whatever it is. or maybe they're burying it or something. But that's the communication lines. That's what that means. So, what are these steps for a site analysis? One of the first things you can do that theoretically is the easiest to cost the least amount of money is to try to get some idea of what the legal boundaries of the property are. You're just looking, you're speculating, you're not going to talk to anybody, you're not going to call anybody, you're not going to talk to a realtor, you're not going to go request information from anybody, you're not going to get a survey. You can go look at deed records and plats online at most county appraisal districts to find information about a particular property. This is basically done by going to, first you go to the county appraisal district. Most counties, if they're somewhat modern, have a interactive GIS map where you can run around online on a map like this one down here and zoom in on it. So it's just like Google Maps, but they have more information. So you find a property that you're interested in, you can click on it, and that property will give you a bunch of property information. It'll tell you whether the taxes have been paid, what was the assessed value of the land, who owns it. It'll tell you all kinds of stuff about the property. And what you do is in the bottom of those records, you can find volume and page numbers of land records that are going to reference specifically what that property is like. So on the online version, you can get some information, but you're not going to be able to find a survey or something by doing that. The survey and the land information is done by going and looking at the original deeds and sale records of the property. And you do that by going to the county land records site. Usually you're going to end up, if it's old fashioned, you're going to talk to a county clerk and they're going to go dig up those records. If it's a nice system, then you can basically find it online pretty quickly just by looking up a document number or a volume and page number because it's all been scanned electronically. So you can go search those places and you can find information about the property, and it can tell you a lot more. So a survey is frequently referenced, and sometimes there'll be a plat drawing, which is basically just a big drawing of a subdivision, like the one you see down here. This is a piece of a plat. That is it's a visual recorded drawing of, it's like a mass scale survey. So that's what that is, and you can find it and you can get real property boundary information. So there was a property that I was helping somebody with where it was very unclear, all this like survey language and stuff written out. What I did is I was able to reproduce the property boundary by following the survey language in a CAD software like AutoCAD. And I was able to reproduce a real space property boundary so I could, theoretically you could like scale a house and put a house on there and see what it could fit. And you can do this stuff without having to do much work. You just go look for it. So that's the first thing that you could do. The next thing you can do that's going to be a much more serious step is getting a survey done. This is something you only do if you're committing to buying something because it's expensive. Surveys they can be expensive, especially if you order each one of these particular things. Surveyors' time is valuable. They are licensed and they are professionals. So one of the first things we'll talk about is, let's look at the survey over here. I'm gonna go and click on this. And let's see what it does, where it takes us. Let me see. Okay, boom. Okay, so this is an example of a CAD file of a survey. The actual survey document that's printed and signed and stuff is going to end up being like on a sheet of paper, black and white and stuff. But this is the electronic drawing version of it. So the kind of information that's going to be in here is all kinds of stuff. So the surveyor, the first thing is the boundary. They're going to go pick up exactly the boundary, and I just clicked on it. This is the real-time property boundary that the surveyors, when they sign and seal a survey, are claiming these are the real property boundaries, these are the real corners. Occasionally, this stuff is adjusted as dirt moves, as like iron rods move and stuff like that. So this is a very, very important legal information. But they'll always get that boundary. Then they'll do that by picking up the corners with their GPS equipment. So here is one point where they picked up a point, and then they just drew lines in between the points in the software. So look at a property boundary. From the property boundary, they can look up legal information and setback requirements, which they did here in this particular project. 10-foot rear building setback, 5-foot side, and a 10-foot front setback looks like. They'll pick up information about pretty much anything that's on the property that you request. And the whole purpose of this is to get the real space stuff that's on the property in a computer on a drawing so that you can know where you're going to put a house, where you're going to put a driveway. You can draw on the lot and use that information into your advantage. So that's the magic of a surveyor, is they can take real world and they can get it in a drawing. That's what their equipment allows them to do very accurately. So they can do things like pick up water meter boxes and fixtures. This MB means meter box. A cool thing about these electronic drawings, there's a way to make this thing not show here. Hide loading meeting controls. Okay. So if I go to my properties. So if I click on this meter box, this electric drawing has information in this layer that tells me his layer was V watermark. So sometimes there's like more information you can get in a CAD file like this that tells you more about what the surveyor is doing and what he's picking up. But that's the basic idea. So they'll pick up driveway shapes, they'll pick up or sewer cleanouts, stuff like that to tell you all about what exactly is on this property. They're also, when they do a survey, they're required to show all the adjacent lots and their lot lines. Those lot lines do not have to be like legally drawn accurately. They're just representations to show the information of what the name of the lot is, the legal name of the lot is that's next to this lot. And they'll show street information as well. So you can see right here, this is a 55.6-foot right-of-way. That means the property dedicated to the road and utilities is 55.6 feet wide. The actual street is probably like 25 or 30 feet wide. So a common way to know where property lines happen is driveway and sidewalk intersections or stuff like that. So you don't actually own sometimes the sidewalk that's in front of your property and stuff like that. That land does not belong to you. So just things to think about. They're going to pick up all kinds of information. They got a legend, explain some points and stuff. They're going to pick up utility power poles, just like all the information on how to get into your drawing. And that's the kind of stuff that's going to be in here. So when you order a survey, you can order, the first thing that pretty much you always need is a boundary survey. You need the legal boundaries of the property in order to do anything. You can get information on there about setbacks. You can have them pick up trees. You can tell them a certain size minimum, like don't pick up a tree with a diameter, a breast height bigger than 6 inches or smaller than 6 inches. I'll just trap those down. You can set your own limits. You can tell them to pick up topography, which could be like there's a drainage feature. I want you to pick up the bottom of that channel and like basically show me on with a bunch of different points where that channel is flowing through my property. You can tell they could pick up topography by doing a grid, which is where they just like get a point system in a bunch of grid, maybe 5 feet apart or something like that. And all those points have an elevation to them in their system. So you can basically figure out what the property is doing, which way the property is sloped. You can do all kinds of stuff with that. Utility poles and meters, they're going to pick up useful information about like, okay, I know my water meter's here, which means if I'm running my water to my house, I should think about how the water is going to get to my house, where the meter is. Maybe that's going to affect where I put the house. Maybe it's not. Of course, the farther you have to run electrical and stuff underground, the more expensive that is. So maybe that matters. And they'll pick up stuff like fences, anything that is worth noting on the property that you request. So that's a survey. The other thing you want to know about your property is you want to know what the dirt is like. You want to know the geotechnical information of the property because you're going to build a house on it or something. Excuse me. And you ought to know what that soil is like, because that soil to an engineer is going to dictate whether you have a big, strong, super foundation, whether you could have a less strong foundation and save some money, whether you're on rock and you don't need that crazy of a foundation at all. These are all things that need to be known. So geotechnical information is for anybody can go find this information on Web Soil Survey online. It is a free service. And basically I downloaded the document. So for this property that's being built, for this lot that I have, it's this guy right here. And I found the same property on this Web Soil Survey. And it basically shows me this map and it shows me the soil type. And there's a big PDF report on the soil type that tells me what I ought to expect. There's tables that I'm after here. So what I need to do is figure out that. Give me just 1 second. Let's find that. Actually, I think I know which one it was. Take me back to the PDF. Okay, so this table, there are different soil types in that drawing, and so it's got different things listed out. The one I was concerned with was KUB, right here. So it says Kurth fine sandy loam, 1 to 3% slopes. So this information is compiled over many years of geotechnical engineers studying Earth's, areas and soil types and this data and that data. These are all estimates. This does not mean that if you dig a hole, you're going to run into exactly this scenario on your site. It's not a perfect system. So that's why you always want to try to get a soil sample of where you're going to put your structure so that you can get that tested and know exactly what you're going to build on. The important numbers when you're looking at all this table are going to be over here on the, sorry, well, that's not working. Over in the right column, the very far right. The text is going to say plasticity index. What this is telling you is how expansive the soil is that you're building on. If these numbers are high, there's 3 numbers. The 3 numbers mean it's going to range from low to middle to high. So the low number is like the lowest one found normally in the area. The middle one's going to be the average, and the high one's going to be the possible worst that's found in the area. Over here, it lists the depth in inches. So as you go down the table, you're going deeper into the ground in this category. So 0 to 8 inches, 8 to 26 inches, 26 to 34. And there's like descriptions of what the soil is like. They have so many terms for dirt. It's ridiculous. I don't know how, like, all the classifications. There's so many ways to say dirt. But over here in the plasticity index, you're going to see on the top of the soil, usually it's going to get worse at the higher you are. Kind of depends on where you are, and it will get more stable the deeper in the ground you go, because usually way down deep there's bedrock somewhere. So the question is just, is it picked up or not? So a plasticity index of 0, which is no plasticity, says this soil does not expand and contract with moisture content. Clay soils, which is usually the issue, expand and contract with moisture content. Why is that a problem that the soil is expanding and contracting? Well, if you build a house on dry soil and then it rains, the soil underneath the center of your house will stay dry, assuming there's no underwater flow stuff going on, which just makes things more complicated. All the ground on the outside of your foundation will get wet and it will expand. What that means is it will go up, like the actual surface of the earth will raise up. And what that does is it will pick up your house too. It'll pick up your foundation. So the center of your house won't want to move, and the outside of your house will move. Depending on how strong your foundation is, it will resist that and it will stay together in one piece, or it might start cracking your sheetrock throughout your house. It kind of depends. Soil is very strong, and the expansion of the soil is not something that can be resisted. All you can do is basically build a house that's like a boat that can float on the soil and then be nice and stiff and strong. So if you have low plasticity, you don't need a crazy foundation. If you have really high plasticity, you kind of need a crazy foundation, because the high plasticity means the soils will expand and contract a lot, and you will need to be able to resist that when it does do that. So you can see that at the top, no plasticity, 3.6. These are good numbers. I think the high number, the worst number is a 72. If you have 72, that is the worst. I think that's the top of the scale. So down here at 26 inches to 61 inches, the numbers aren't very good. They're getting up in the middle of the range. So there's some good plasticity going on there. So it's something to be thought about. There's not a lot at the top, but there's some soil that's still kind of close to the surface that could cause some problems. So that's understanding the dirt that you're building on. That's where you can get some of that information. Web Soil Survey online. So geotechnical information, that's what that is. Utility availability requests. So this is where you're taking steps to, probably before you bought the property, you're trying to figure out what's available. A lot of times land selling websites are going to tell you, they're going to present that information because that's useful information to know. They will tell you who the utility providers are, but sometimes you just don't know. So you got to Google it. And it's usually as simple as what's the county, who is the water purveyor, who is the electrical purveyor. That is the word you would use, who's providing that utility. And usually Google will help you find somebody. Sometimes it's kind of tricky, but that's how you find who it is. And then once you find out who it is, you go to their website and you dig around and you find out. Sometimes they have a map showing their like service area, which your lot is either in the service area or it's not. If it's not in the service area, then they're not going to give you service. That's their pipes and their stuff don't go that far. So utility availability requests can be it can be a letter, it can be an email. Sometimes that information is not available, so you just have to find a contact or an email and basically say, "Hey, I'm building at this address. Do you have utility availability here?" And they will respond with another letter that says, "Yes, we do." Or they'll respond and they say, "No, we don't, but we might in the future during this date," or "No, we don't, and we're not going to." So that's utility availability requests. You got to go find out who's providing the services. It's very convenient when the land sellers are saying, "Hey, it's this guy and it's this guy," because then you just know where to go. Let's go back one. I'm going to talk a little bit about digging around on these websites and some of the stuff you can find. I'll give you an example of this one I'm doing here with the electrical. Let me get this guy. Okay, so this is Entergy. This is the company that provides power to this area and this lot. This is an information I found by digging around on their website. I think in the maybe business customers or residential customers, you dig around the tabs and you try to find information about like connecting builder services. These are people who are developing and building, and they need to connect to the existing underground buried or overhead stuff, right? So this is where you'd find it. And you can find all these. There's wonderful. This is a pretty well done website. There's very clear links here on how to request service, meaning you're going to fill out this form information. You're going to pay fees to access their system. You're going to have all of their conformance to their drawings and their stuff ready to go. They're going to come out and they're going to connect electricity from their transformer to your house. There's a bunch of stuff that has to happen before that, but this is where you fill out those requests. So, well, how do I know what I need to do for them to connect? Well, they give you a whole bunch of drawings. They tell you how to do it. It's all right here. So I want to do, for example, underground. So if I want underground service at house or building, I'm going to click on this link and it will take me to a PDF and it will show me drawings of what they're expecting to see. If I am doing regular old 120, 240 single phase service, then this is how they want this meter box to be wired. Now my job is to wire afterwards, not to wire the connections that power this meter box. That's done by the utility company. Their responsibility stops at the meter. But these are drawings on how this is all supposed to be connected, and these are all more complicated services for industrial stuff. It tells you about rules. If you are going to dig underneath something, it basically says, don't do this, don't get close to this. Here's your clearances that are required. Do not block this. Here's the meter socket clearances you should give. Basically, your job is to put all this stuff in place so that when they show up, they're ready to go. This is describing underground stuff. So this is telling you how you're going to come up underground and how you're going to attach this stuff, what the heights are going to be on your house and stuff like that. All of their rules is all in their drawings. It's all in their paperwork. You just have to read. You have to do research and figure out what it is that they want. Here's an example of conduit with a pedestal, and they ran the rest of the conduit to the house. Like that's just where they wanted their pole and their meter and stuff to go. This is describing basically what happens here. So your responsibility in this case with this guys, because I've already read the rules, is I need to supply underground conduit and stub up my pipe a certain size within like 8 or 9 inches of the bottom of their telephone pole. When I do that, they will run the rest of the conduit up to their transformer. They will run the wires down that conduit up through the conduit, and they'll pull the wires into the meter box. They'll take care of that. So this is basically an example of doing your research. Find out how things are supposed to be built, how they want things done. Here's an example of overhead temporary. So when you're building stuff, sometimes you need temporary power. Oh wait, let's do underground temporary because that's what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna get some conduit in here. We're going to have them run power over to a pole that's sticking up out of the ground, and it's gonna have this meter socket on it, and it's gonna have a little box with some electrical outlets sticking out the bottom. This is how you can get power temporarily for building your house. And this is just an example of the drawing on how they're expecting this to be so that they can connect. There's rules about where switches are and just all this stuff. So this is all stuff that's available online. You just got to know how to find it, and you got to be willing to dig around, basically. But it's not complicated. It's just you got to look. So that's more about utility availability. Same thing applies for water. Same rules. They're going to describe what they're expecting, how they're going to connect, all that stuff. Who's responsible for what? You just got to read. So if you would like to learn more about this process of due diligence and site planning and stuff like that, then you should watch the Spec House series by Essential Craftsman. Episodes 1 through 5 cover his analysis of the lot he's building on. And it's really great content. So that's a great thing to watch and get another idea of how he's handling his situation. And of course, you can look around and dig around with property information and utility readings and stuff. Like if you want to know, you're in an area right now where you work for, with CPS or something, and you want to know how would I connect with CPS stuff? You just go dig around, find their paperwork. It's a big company, so they'll have their paperwork. You can find drawings. So you can do that. Look around the appraisal district, look on land records, and of course, play around on the web soil survey and look at soil types and see what the dirt's like in your area. See if it's expansive or not. Usually you'll probably know if your house is flexy and things move a lot, then it's probably expensive. So that is that, and that's the basic premise of site planning and utility access. Is you're trying to figure out how my house is going to interact with my site, and what do I need to know to get resources to my house so I can actually build. And that will end the slideshow. So we will go back. And I need to find out how to get this thing to pop back up. Uh-oh. I did a bad thing. Wait, Alt Tab, let's try that. Escape. Oh, there it is. Ah! Stop share. Woo! Thought I got stuck there. All right. So I actually panicked because I thought the Zoom call had failed and I just was talking to myself for an hour.
That would suck.
Yeah, that would suck. But I'm going to end the recording.